Join us on the last bus home.
Yeah, so I said, mate, you're not possessed. You're just being a dickhead.
Fair enough.
Right, buddy. Today, we're going to take the bus over to the States. I'm going to hit you up with a tale of a place called Black River Falls in Wisconsin. You ever heard of it?
Whoa, with the dog, man. Not Black River Falls, Wisconsin.
No. So I think, I would hope most of our listeners are going to know what I'm on about with this. It is, of course, the occurrence is based on the book. The book was based on what actually happened. People know it as a Wisconsin death trip. So this was...
Based on the works of Static X, I believe.
Well, this is it, mate. The research proved quite tricky with that one because basically every podcast I was looking into just brought up a Wayne Static song. I think I used to be into him back in the day. I'm not too sure.
R.I.P.
Oh, yeah. Another tragic nu metal death. But anyway, the Wisconsin Death Trip was a book based on the occurrences that happened in the town of Black River Falls during, it was a pretty short period, only 10 years, 1890 to 1900. A lot of grim stuff happened, and so we're going to go through that. So we're going to have a little bit of a history of Black River Falls. And this town was all about the natural resources. So get this, my friend. Not only did it have vast forests, which was good for the logging industry, but also huge deposits of iron ore. And as you know, could link to a lot of paranormal activity, but we'll get into that. So obviously the town's inhabitants were reliant on these industries. These industries just obviously said how this place went. What I'm going to do is go through some of the early settlements. So these are kind of the people who established the town. And I want to give a shout out to the Ho-Chunk Nation, who were the OGs before the European settlers came in.
Sorry, Ho-Chunk.
Ho-Chunk Nation, yeah. They look pretty badass from a lot of the photos I could kind of see. And they go back a long, long time, thousands of years, long before the European arrival. And not just Wisconsin, the area I'm talking about, but including like western parts of the state, all around that kind of sort of general area. They can be traced back.
What area is Wisconsin in comparison to the places British people may know?
Well, I looked it up.
I'm talking the middle.
Pretty much know it for cheese, but that might be...
I mean, where, like, geographically we're looking in
America. I'm not going to embarrass myself with that one. I'm sure if we have any American viewers, they're going to school us on that. But just Google it, my friend. It's in there. That's all I can say. So these people in the Black River Falls area believed to be the descendants of the effigy mound building cultures. They lived off the land, fishing, gathering, all the cool stuff. They eventually moved to, I believe it was Nebraska in 1873. But a lot of them actually returned, and it's still there to this day. So I think they've actually got, we're going to go into a little bit of the kind of present day vibe in Black River Falls. Seems kind of cool. A lot of the pictures I was looking at. Seems a nice little town, really small population as well. So the Black River Falls, as I mentioned, it was all about its logging. And this is what kind of brought all the money to it. It's got these trees, like huge white pine, I think it is, go up massive. So the first attempt to actually set up a logging industry was in 1819. So this is kind of like the first time the European sort of settlers moved in to try and set up businesses, largely unsuccessful. So the next one was in 1839, and this is kind of said as the first settler of Black River Falls. Obviously, the native tribes were there already, but This guy came in, a guy called Jacob Spalding, who erected the first sawmill, and then, like I say, establishing this kind of like town. So that was 1839. After that, you saw quite a lot of kind of people moving in. You had a bit of Mormon logging. Seemed to be, from what I could gather, a bit of like a mob culture of all these like badass loggers wanting to move in and kind of get dominance. The decline of that was around 1905, and that's going to link into a lot of our story and pretty much. We'll go into facts and theories, but I think a lot of it was down to just the general grimness of the time. And, you know, it's pretty much prevalent in a lot of towns. When it loses its industry, you're going to hit, you know, low, well, income of any kind. It'd be good, but it can lead to hard times. And I think a lot of that is what was happening here. But for the sake of my paranormal interest, there's a lot of weird shit that went on. And I think, you know, some of it goes unexplained. A lot of it just seems to be pretty brutal madness. So we'll look into that. So I'll just tell you a little bit about a guy who I looked into, and this guy is pretty prevalent again to the story. This is the guy who took all the pictures that the book Wisconsin Death Trip was actually based on. A guy called Charles Van Schaik. I think I've got that right. 1852, died in 1946. He was the professional photographer who basically lived in the town for quite a long time, but through that period. So kind of a really good time to be the town's photographer. So anything that was happening, they were going to him.
Someone was doing all right then.
Yeah, exactly. And his photos, man, are the best. I mean, you've seen the Wisconsin Death Trip book. It's badass. A lot of grim shit in there about when they used to do the post-mortem photography, pictures of like dead relatives all dressed up. Really like dark shit, but it's got this kind of...
It's a pretty grim book.
Yeah, it really is. It's amazing. And you just see the eyes of these people. It just kind of tells you they've seen hardship. Really...
To be honest, not a lot of books have bothered me that much, but I mean, God, it was years ago you lent me it, and it still pops up in my head now.
Ah, yeah. The pictures stick with you for
why
life.
we're doing this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's grim.
It's a brutal book.
Really is. And anybody who hasn't had a look through, it's just a really good documentation of what actually happened.
Compendium of sorrow, I would say.
Yeah, compendium of grimness. And all of it thanks to this guy who basically just documented this town. So his arrival basically set up a little studio in Black River Falls in 1879. Like I say, he became the town photographer. And back then, it would have been an even smaller population. You had one photographer, you probably had one butcher, I don't know, one this, one that. And he was your guy you went to. So he did a lot of things for like family life. I've got a little bit of his work here. So studio portraits, approximately 60% of his surviving negatives were like studio portraits. So these would capture like...
I'm guessing it worked for the local paper, so we'd get like early warning on happenings, I suppose.
Exactly. He covered major events, local events. So all that stuff he would have, it'd be provided. I think he was kind of like a freelance photographer as you would. He'd provide work to whoever wanted to pay for it, really. Took a lot of stuff. As I mentioned, his post-mortem photography. So that was kind of like the stuff in the book that really kind of gets you, especially like obviously the children. Formal portraits of families who have lost like loved ones, so you can see like the grief in their eyes. It's really dark. He took a lot of pictures of the Ho Chunk people as well, as I mentioned. Depicts like them, you know, around the Black River Falls area. Commissioned by the Ho Chunk subjects themselves as well. Creates a nice little sort of like portrait of their way of life. So he was definitely a cool dude. I mean, I say that, I don't know too much about his personal life. There wasn't a whole lot of information on him, but as far as his professional life went, pretty badass.
To be fair, I don't think people had much personal lives back then. It was filled with getting shit done before bedtime.
This is it. I think so long as you ate that day, it was pretty banging. So, yeah.
That was your personal life, that, when you sat down to eat your tea.
That's it. So yeah, he was definitely like I say, a big figure in the story. Going to go through the downturn now, and as I mentioned, this town was heavily reliant on the timber, the mining, all that stuff. So it faced a severe downturn, and well, normally what follows with that is a depression, especially after the 1893 panic, which I think was the more widespread depression that was happening.
I was going to say, is this like a localized depression?
Exactly, yeah. So this was, like I say, just ran sort of almost kind of like alongside with that. So really kind of brutal time. Led to obviously what depression does, widespread poverty, desperation, and that pretty much exacerbated things. That seems to be the main kind of theory as to what exactly was going on here. And we'll move on now to what exactly did go on there. So here's a rundown of like what I could find, occurrences, and the people. It's mainly like based around the people and what they did. So it was like quite cool. There's lots of sort of individual little stories about what this actually is. What is the Wisconsin Death Trip? This is basically this is a story of a town going mad, and you can look into the paranormal aspects of it. You can look into the sign of the times and draw whatever conclusion you want. But I'll just run through the facts. So these are all kind of taken, like I say, from Wisconsin Death Trip book. There's a few little kind of stories that I think were taken from like newspapers at the time, but that book really is a kind of all-encompassing documentary of it. So if you find anything that's not in there, you're pretty lucky.
So it's not really. I mean, there's a lot of crime in there, but it's not true crime as such.
This
it's not
is
focusing on the true crime. It's just a load of really harrowing tales, really, but they're all real. And I'd recommend anyone who's into listening to this sort of thing, give it a read. It's not even a big book.
No.
Yeah, but it's worth it if you feel yourself getting too jolly and smiling too much one day. Then grab yourself a copy, sort that out, find yourself a grimace.
Mate, exactly. Coffee and a rainy Sunday, open this book.
Oh,
You're laughing.
yeah, a cold coffee, a soggy biscuit, a holy blanket, and get a good read. Maybe leave a window open and get a bit cold as well.
Hell yeah, you know it. You know how it goes. So one of the main characters, I think, like, I don't want to say there's any sort of main characters from this story. Again, it's all pretty much stories of tragedy and things like that.
The main character would be Death.
Yeah, pretty much. Death and desperation, despair. 3Ds.
All four of the horsemen are there.
You know it. Chilling in a calf. So, Mary Sweeney, the window smasher, as she was fondly named. So, as I mentioned, perhaps the most famous individual in the Wisconsin Death Trip story. Mary Sweeney was respectable school teacher who embarked on repeated, often cocaine-fueled rampages of smashing windows in Black River Falls and other towns across Wisconsin.
Even in a depression.
Oh, dude, yeah.
The methods will float to the top.
This is it.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't really afford to eat, but I'll ring my dealer up for a cheeky baggie. Not sure how it works. Turns up on a horse. So her motives were pretty unclear, though sometimes attributed to a desire for vengeance against doctors or simply a craze that seized her. She would often express a liking for the sound of glass jingle, as she called it. So that tells me, she didn't really have a person she was targeting. She just wanted to let off some steam. She was arrested and obviously institutionalized numerous times, but she managed to escape, or sometimes they would just let her go, probably fed up with her, like, bugger off, can't be doing you anymore. I can imagine she wasn't the quietest of inmates. So she'd get released and she'd do it again. She was a crazy broad, but whatever was happening. So that was Mary Sweeney. Going to move on to this was quite a funny one, the delusional opera singer, Pauline L'Allemand. So this was a woman who arrived in Brockway, near Black River Falls, all the way from Chicago, claiming to be a world-renowned French opera singer who had inherited land. She attempted to build a home and stage performances, but her false teeth and increasingly dishevelled state led locals to doubt her claims. She was observed to be speaking with spirits and hearing voices. So this lady, basically, again, another sort of tragic story of poor mental state, and that pretty much deteriorated. She seemed to be pretty ranty, anti-Catholic conspiracy theories, lots of kind of like pretty wild stuff. She was declared insane and committed to the local state hospital. Again, managed to escape, just like Mary, yeah, and she just disappeared. So just a bit of a wild character. So they're the two kind of, I don't want to say jolly, but not incredibly depressing ones. But now you might want to sip your drinks and chill out on this one, because we've got some pretty dark stories here. So I'm going to go into our first person who was featured in the newspapers for pretty despicable act, the drowning of a child, Mrs. John Larson. So in a horrific act attributed to profound mental instability, Mrs. Larson drowned her 3 young children in a lake. The lake was called St. Croix. Her husband reportedly found her on the shore with 2 children already dead in the sand, and the third later discovered. The tragic case is pretty much all put down to her just being really mentally ill. Again, she had no kind of sort of story as to why she did it. She just did it. And that seemed to be a lot of the sort of issues with these cases. There was no big kind of, oh, I did it for this reason. They were just down and really like dark and desperate and doing desperate things. Our next person I looked into is a guy called John Isaacson. He's a religious delusionalist. John Isaacson, suffering from religious delusions, held members of a Christian meeting at knife point, believing he was actively fighting or vanquishing Satan. Again, not a lot of information on this guy, but just a case of mental illness. So I can imagine this newspaper in Black River Falls it's like one of those parody newspapers, just really brutal events every week during that period. So there was a story, again, not too much information, but seemed pretty mental, but it was an unnamed 14-year-old German boy. So this young boy, and it was his younger brother, I believe, murdered an old farmer with a shotgun and then just took over his house. Full on.
What year was this?
Full on house seizure. Within that period, all these stories and pretty much everything I'm going to go for was between 1890 to 1900, so roughly within that 10-year period.
Right. No chance it could be Hans Assmann.
I'm not sure of Hans Assmann's time period, but I don't put anything by that guy. He can pretty much do what he wants. So
you could throw time travel on his CV. I don't know.
Hell yeah, you can. So this German kid, he was eventually caught and sentenced to life imprisonment. Again, no kind of like thing behind it. They just did what they did and did a little house seizure. Another tale of an unnamed Norwegian teenage girl, quite a dark one. This young girl committed suicide by drowning herself in a lake. Again, a lake obviously in Black River Falls. She left behind a note as well, stating that her parents had physically abused her and overworked her, leading to the end of her life. So that
but
was
nobody knew why she did it.
Well, this one, I think she pretty much blamed them. So yeah, it was quite a dark one. But again, another story that cropped up in the Black River Falls Times. So this one was about a wild man, another little story. So this individual, described as around 35 years old, with long black whiskers, barefoot, not very clothed, shall we say, carrying a hatchet, and he went around terrorising farmhouses north of Grantsberg, and I think that's like a nearby region. He would appear at houses and just eat ravenously. whatever he's eating, it didn't actually say, but he would disappear into the woods and he would just yell. I think he was like howling all the way. Just a wild dude. I think, again, I didn't really see any stories about him going nuts on anyone. He would just be that kind of like a little bit more than an annoyance, should we say. I mean, if you're sat down chilling at night after a hard day's work down the log factory and you've just got this dude in rags eating some kind of like pork chop screaming, you're going to be like,
It sounds like he might have been some kind of hermit, and the town's growing into his area.
or a spice
I
head.
won't say territory.
Yeah, never know. But yeah, it kind of pissed me off. But not as murderous as the other ones, So I was looking into this, and there seemed to be a bit of a diphtheria epidemic around the time as well. I know it's not really attributed to anything paranormal. I think it, like I say, it all just accumulated into just the darkness of this town. But the newspapers, from what I could see, were filled with like reports of like kids dying from this rampant diphtheria epidemic. Entire families, it looks like, were wiped out as well. And I think that's where...
Yeah, I don't think they can really be included in the death trip, because that sort of thing, dirty water, cleanliness, and general sanitation, was all over. I think it's the unexplained reasons of death, I think, is more.
I do agree. And again, this could be counted for all the shit that was going on. But from the stories I looked at, it seemed to be extra in this area. And again, that could be because it was a small kind of like isolated town. It wasn't maybe, and again, I'm just theorizing here, wasn't like a big city where it could get straight access to like hospitals and stuff. So it did seem to be rampant, and especially during this time. But like you said, it was kind of everywhere. And again, for our boy Van Schaik to kind of come in and cash in on like pictures of like the dead children, because that was kind of like the thing back then. If your kid died, even after death, you wanted a picture of him looking all swish and suave in the brand new kicks. Grim, but we have moved on from that, thankfully. So we're going to move into some of the other residents there, and we're going to cover a little bit of fire setting, shall we say, rampant arsonists, a few suicides again, and I think suicides would just be a sign of the times. And the book does detail a lot of these kind of like, well, the methods used, like carbolic. Is it carbolic? Yeah, carbolic acid poisoning. Obviously, a lot of hanging, shooting. One guy read a story where he got a load of dynamite, put it in the ground, lit it, and just laid his head on the ground and bang. So there was, a few pretty creative.
Just sit on it, didn't lay all over it.
No, man.
Just laid his head on it.
Laid his head like it was a goddamn pillar straight from Silent Night. And it gave him a Silent Night. But yeah, pretty dark. So, I mean, head on dynamite, kind of... No, let's not go into that. It was dark, let's just say that. And as I mentioned, in grim times, you might want to set a few fires. So, numerous accounts, absolutely numerous. Detailed intentional fires set by random individuals, often with, again, pretty much unclear or no rationale. They're just setting a fire. A young Polish girl, for instance, set fire to her employer's barn because she was lonely and wanted excitement. This is kind of the vibes I'm getting from those days when there really is nothing to lose. You're like, do you know what? Fuck it, man. Let's set a fire. Who gives a shit? You're really not, are you? You're just not going to give a shit anymore. What's a fire? So, yeah, a lot of that shit happened. The Butcher, and this is pretty, man, what's that TV show? It's so good. League of Gentlemen, where they all get the nosebleed from the magic meat. Well, this was a story about the butcher who died from a nosebleed. And I'm kind of wondering if those boys maybe took a little bit of inspiration from the story. But anyway, a Milwaukee butcher who died after suffering a nosebleed for 9 straight days. While not a Black River Falls local, but still within that area, that type of bizarre behaviour seemed to be reported quite a bit. in the Badger State Banner, which was the local newspaper covering that area. So try to look into this sort of like nosebleed little phenomenon. But again, dude, it's like same with the diphtheria. It's you're stressed, and as we've seen, cocaine is pretty prevalent in the Black Falls area. Maybe this butcher was just doing a few mini 2 lines on his break. Shit got real. But yeah, again, just grim stuff. A few other little notable mentions, and again, you can sort of look into the stories, and it's just random suicide after abuse after grim story. It's all there for you, but I just wanted to get a few little people in. But I did want to kind of call out these because while there wasn't a lot of information about it, again, a few little cool stories. A guy called George Canuck was a labourer who alleged to have sold his 7-year-old son to Italian peddlers during a drunken orgy. So, yeah, he was having a good old night after work. They all got down to it, got pissed up, and he just really needed that money, man. So he's like, see that kid, 7? Can you do it with him? And they were like, yep, we'll take him. We'll put him to work. And everyone just went on about the day like it was no thing. So pretty grim. There was a little story of a dude who shot a woman for refusing to marry him, as you do. Just everybody seemed to go for the pretty much the knee-jerk reaction of the times. There was no sit down and, I'm going to have a think about this. I'm going to count to 10, walk away. Everyone was just straight fight or flight. There was a little story about a German immigrant who starved his entire livestock, attributed his actions to witches preying upon him, said that his livestock was pretty much cursed by the witches, so he just had to not feed them, as you do.
Any particular witches, are they named or anything, or is he just saying witches?
He just said witches. The witches, they are preying on my livestock, and I had to starve them all. So yeah, no good, mate. Little story of an exhumed woman. It was a pretty grim report of a woman whose body was found turned over in a coffin with bitten fingers, pretty much suggesting that she was alive. So the kind of story was that, what was it they had to dig her up for? But basically they said that she'd been in some kind of trance. They wasn't checking. There wasn't doctors there to actually confirm, check the pulses. And when they dug this woman up, I think it was down to some jewellery that a husband had like contested or something. They pretty much saw her with like bitten fingers, I guess at the stress of realising that you've just been buried alive. That was dark. And that was a newspaper report as well. So if that happened,
surely that's bitten. Maybe they were just injured from trying to claw away.
That's what I thought, like scratching your way out as you would do. But either or, man, that's dark. I think that's got to be up there as probably one of the worst ways to go. Do you know what? Hearing that story, head on a dynamite, not that bad. Just don't ever bury me alive. So yeah, a lot of dark shit happened in that times, and the kind of general theories are what you would expect. And I think every logical person is going to put this down to the economic collapse. Closure of the mines just led to widespread unemployment, leads to poverty, leads to financial ruin, people losing properties. I don't really know what the mortgage agreements were back in the late 1800s, but I can't imagine they were great. Not great. As you mentioned, the diphtheria epidemic was widespread, but obviously in a town like this, on top of all the shit they're going through, the suffering, rampant child mortality, it was, again, just adding to it. Top this off with widespread undiagnosed mental illness. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't a thing back in the day where you're going to have the doctors who would know about this. This led to, religious delusions, paranoia, nervous breakdowns. Many of the people of this town were institutionalized at the state hospital, a place called Mendota State Hospital. Arson, on top of all this, as I mentioned, there was a little procurement for setting fires with pretty... I didn't want to say malicious intent because there wasn't really intent. They just set the fires. Numerous barns, and these barns, you got to think, full of hay. They would just go up like that. So not much effort needed. Again, suicide, really dark, but it's going to be the only way out for a lot of these people who just couldn't get the help they needed. And as we discussed, some pretty gruesome methods. Throwing shout out to the dude who laid his head on the dynamite, because that's desperation right there, but what a way to go. Bizarre crimes and a lot of violence. We haven't gone into it too much, but just a catalogue of murders, violent assaults, and pretty much similar to the last stuff. There wasn't a lot of intent behind it. People would just go up to people after a hard day and just take it out. It was pretty brutal, and I can only think there was so much kind of domestic abuse going on within the home, child abuse. And again, not even, bad people. It's just people who've been worn down, and they have no way to express anything. They've got no way of getting any help. It's just really dark, and just dark times. A lot of homeless people in the town as well, because obviously, it's going to be hard to keep your property up when you've lost your job. So people did go onto the streets, making it.
But wouldn't that account for a lot of the fires? People just trying to keep warm in a barn and trying to light up a little fire in it, just getting out of control.
Yeah, I'm putting it more down to literally wanted to start a fire. I don't really think from a lot of the stories I was going through, it was like accidental blazes. And I'm sure there would be if you've got these guys hanging around. But a lot of the stories of the homeless, and it might have been different back then, but they may have been, well, obviously there was more desperate, but a lot of it puts it down to, petty crime. They were obviously stealing food to try and eat and survive. But they were said to intimidate the townsfolk and get violent. Again, just all acts of desperation, I guess. So I did look into it to try and get a little bit of, it's an excellent story on its own, but I wanted to see if there was any kind of paranormal occurrences, and it was really, really hard, other than, I believe it mentions it within the book itself, poltergeist activity. So a lot of the houses, again, people said there were things flying off the plates and things smashing, stuff like that. Generalized kind of poltergeist activity, but
at the time or since?
At the time. But it was like one kind of story of somebody who said they were mad and they were possessed anyway. And you could just look into it. There's just so many stories of just this one little bit where this person either did this to someone or, it's a really well documented time, really is. And it's really cool insight into that world, but just don't know how desperate the times was, and it's a bit more tricky to put it straight down to poltergeist activity when you've also got this person who's lost a job and completely delusional and off the rails. You're maybe not going to believe them about the plates flying off the counter there. So a bit tricky to kind of nail down, but I just think the whole just grimness of it in general. My kind of theory, if we're looking at it, if you're going to ask me honestly, and you know me, Scott, being a man of science.
Honestly, Lee, what's your theory?
So here's what I'm thinking. As I mentioned at the start, we have large deposits of iron ore. We've established from other episodes, mate, that iron ore breaks a rift in dimensions, leading to other entities being able to cross over. Couple that with this town's horrendous history and what it was going through, all that energy is going to get built up via morphic resonance. It's going to be within the landscape. That's going to call on the other dimensions. It's going to create a rift, and you're going to get all this bad shit happening. I believe a lot of these people may have been possessed by other realm entities. The spirit world may be crossing over here. That's kind of my conclusion on the occurrences of Black River Falls. But again, that's just me. You being the hardened skeptic, I'm sure you've got other theories, which I'd be interested to hear.
Well, there's two that I kind of go with that are mentioned in the book and online, and I just believe them. Is one, although we're talking depression and poverty and blah, 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 it causes people to rely on scant supplies, which means eking out your grain, which then leaves your grain to get rotten, which then leads to ergot, the fungus that would form within your grain when it starts going bad. And what ergot does, it affects the brain and essentially just sends you mad. And it's been blamed for apparent zombie attacks in the past
Yes, mate.
and just unprovoked murders, just complete insanities, all brought on by ergot. That, I think, is a very real issue there because of the poverty. And and with bread being such a basic food for the rural types, because it's probably one of the easiest to make, and if there's very very loveless individuals starving their cattle, then there's not going to be a lot of meat either. So, yeah, ergot being an issue for me. And one of the others, one of the other problems which it goes into, which is one of my favourites, not because it's fun, but because I think it's very real and very underappreciated, is just the change in times. This is around, we're talking people who have like moved away from the busies and moved. I mean, Wisconsin's quite north above Chicago, but below Canada. It's basically people who wake up and fill the day with living, surviving. It's not, they can't just spend 2 of those hours out of the day going to Tesco. They're growing and harvesting and preparing ingredients, that everything, even to make a meal, there's hours of work goes into it before you even start cooking it. And there's just various jobs that need doing all day long. And then, as long as it's done by sundown, unless you can take it home at the end of the day and do it by candlelight. So, that's what filled people's lives for years, hundreds of years. That's how life was. But also around this time, industry's kicking off. And suddenly people are having to be somewhere by a certain time. A certain amount of work is to be done by a certain time. And maybe some people are having to work to get money to make sure these jobs are fulfilled, but are not living in an area that would benefit from these goods. So they've got to go home and maybe do extra work on top of that to get their dinner. It isn't as easy as just slinging something in the back of the car from the company store. It's going home and sorting out your allotment, basically. So I think, one of the issues raised by the book is the fact that people were just struggling to keep up with the demands of the time. And it's a complete change. It's not like it's some at the past. If anything, it got worse, and then people started carrying watches, and then they had to be here by this time, and then the trains come through, and then they're all on certain time scales, and suddenly it doesn't all need to be done by sundown. It needs to be done by lunchtime because something else needs done by sundown. And I think not secluded, but a remote town would feel it, because just being the butcher who just has to sort the meat for the next day and sell it as he goes along, suddenly is having to provide so much meat for a hotel or a company or a factory or whatever. And I think people were struggling to adapt. Like now, now it probably happened a couple of decades ago when computers came into it, and a lot of manual workers were put out, or a lot of quite skilled people were put out of work because computers then took over, which cut down that. Now we've got AI cutting down more. And people are struggling, older people, the boomers, are struggling to keep up with the technology.
Yeah.
And instead of being assisted, they're being made fun of
Yeah.
because they're boomers, you know. And, they're just idiots. They're just complaining. So they're not worth helping. And then they're stuck because they can't use the technology because they're arthritic and they don't understand it. And then, the next phase of technology is now phasing us out. And I'm probably not using my phone to its full capacity, I'll be honest. And yeah, I think, but back then, to the country folk, it was just a lot of change on top of a lot of poverty, and people just quit.
Yeah.
Essentially, they just gave up, and they thought, "Oh, well, I'm not going to go quiet."
Brain snapped. I think could be a.
I think, and that's my favorite. My favorite. That sounds like I really like that idea. My point is, that's not my favorite idea. It's my. That's the one. That's the hill I'm going to die on this. It's a lot of pressure for people who just wanted to get by,
Yeah.
and the world wasn't allowing it. And just like today, maybe there wasn't enough compassion from the people who were up to date.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
So the city people who were making the money didn't have the compassion for the people who couldn't keep up. Just like boomers today, and it'll be just like us in 10, 15 years.
This is it. And I think there were so many.
The only happiness there is the young people now in 20, 30, 40 years, they're going to be left behind. So, it's unfortunately, that's life, and that's the most depressing part of it.
Every generation gets left behind, mate. But
I've got no shit joke for that one. I'm sorry. It's that's the Wisconsin Death Trip. It is a thoroughly depressing read.
yeah, it really is.
It's a read worth having. It's a good read.
Well, if anybody hasn't read it, I really would implore them to do it. It's a book by Michael Essay, and it's actually a fairly old one. I didn't realise it was so old. 1973.
70. I was going to say 72. Yeah, 73.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
And like I say, thanks to our town's photographer, it was basically.
Well, it's not like it's going to be out of date, seeing the action stopped in 1900.
Yeah, this is it. But just incredibly well documented, and all the newspaper clippings as well. There's
also a film.
I was just about to say the movie.
Narrated by Sir Ian Holm, I believe, but I've not seen it.
It's pretty banging. Really good.
I mean to. I definitely mean to.
Really good soundtrack as well by DJ Shadow and John Cale. But
not Static X.
Not Static X, mate, unfortunately. But that film's it's banging. It's just like a dark art house film, just showing you I think it has reenacted sort of scenes, and then it shows you modern day film from Black River Falls, which are all in colour, but then it goes back to the black and white, really stark.
Is it narrated by the same Sir Ian Holm of Bilbo Baggins fame?
I'm not too sure. Let me just get this.
No.
Oh, yeah, it is. Sir Ian Holmes, sorry.
Yeah, I know Ian Holmes narrated it, but yeah, it is. It's Bilbo Baggins.
Fair play.
Nice.
But yeah, directed by a dude called James Marsh. Not heard of him, but that was a film from 1999 anyway. But again, really good kind of if you don't want to read the book, because this is a really good visual adaptation of it. But having them together is just a cracking read and a watch. It's just
if the film's as interesting as the book, which I'm guessing it is.
It is. It's really good.
I'd recommend either.
It's really
not
smart.
that I've seen the film, but like I say, if it's any bit as good as the book, then yeah, do it.
Yeah, done a lot. I mean, to make it.
But I think the book's good to have on the shelf, like a show-off piece as well. I think.
Yeah, just good to crack out for anyone to just have a look at. The pictures are banging, and obviously nothing like it from today.
That's it. It's nothing to pull off the road and dirty your visor to, but it's good.
None of that. Feeling the vibration of the cycle underneath. But yeah, anyway, Black River Falls today's, like I say, looked into it, seems pretty banging. You've got the Ho Chunk Nation, operate a casino and hotel within the area. I think they have like days as well. They do like a powwow weekend on Memorial and Labor Day. Hopefully telling people about their kind of history seems to be.
Oh, they do that for the Adlet as well.
Yeah, there you go.
They have a powwow for them.
The Jackson County Historical Society Museum, plays quite a big part because that has quite a lot of stuff from the Wisconsin Death Trip within it, which I'm guessing it's not like you go to this Black River Falls town, you think it's just going to be, it's not like Pluckley, where they're pretty much like, we're a haunted town. I can imagine it was that grim that they don't really want to be like celebrating it. So I think you've got to go to this.
I mean, it's something that happened in the past. It's not something you want to sell a T-shirt about.
No, exactly. But yeah, this museum basically has a lot of the stuff.
Saying that, I do feel I need to reinstall Red Dead and have a little bimble up to that part of the map and just see if there's any references in there.
Yeah, good call. Classic game as well.
There's bound to be.
There should be. Rockstar are on it. But yeah, so
and it's always been updated, I believe, so there'll be all sorts in there.
Oh, it is, mate. Yeah.
So Rockstar, if you're listening,
which I'm sure they are,
chuck it in there.
So yeah, like I say, it seems to be a pretty nice town. They've got the Black State Forest and Jackson County Forest, and as far as I can see from that, all your kind of stuff you would do there, you canoeing, kayaking, hiking, biking. So it seems a pretty like sort of scenic place, and I can't imagine you go there and see sort of any remnants as to what happened back in the day. But again, just a really well documented and interesting part of time, and I think it's probably one of those ones which has been quite, for want of a better word, lucky, right place, wrong time, where they've kind of jumped on the story, and thanks to that photographer who documented it. But I think this was probably happening all over America. I'm guessing. I don't know too much about the history of the
that
times,
was
but
one of my questions. North America is too big for this to be isolated, but why Wisconsin though? Is it because it was so close to Chicago that maybe those who were slightly more fortunate in their situations, that more people heard about it, whereas you go down to the middle of nowhere in like Nebraska, Dakota, what have you, that maybe there were smaller towns, mining towns, that because a lot of mining towns just emptied as well. There's a lot of ghost towns out there, so maybe there's a lot of undocumented, or maybe just lost into local papers and didn't get picked up. I don't know.
I reckon so.
But Wisconsin, where it is, closer to, like, say, Hudson Bay than other areas of America. So, the Hudson Bay, you've got your trappers and your Hudson Bay Company. So, there's a lot more word being spread up there.
You have all those cool ghost mining towns. I mean, there's so many like YouTube adventure videos where they go and check them out.
I see so many of them going cheap as well. We could open a theme park. We could go with like Last Bus Homeland and just have nothing there, and then take people's money.
Could have a Hans Assman taking tickets.
Oh, and a waxwork of Hans Assman.
Hell yeah.
Obviously.
Hell yeah. But no, like the history of these places, when people go to them and they do a little bit of research, it was all about the local saloon, seeing, saloon/brothel, seeing fights and murders. And I think these places were just, literally the Wild West. So.
Well, yeah, there'd have been no law.
Yeah.
No, like, I don't even know the word. I've gone dumb. Well, it's one of my favourite things about this podcast, that people leave it stupider than they started. But, including me, there was no structured law, should I say?
Yeah,
really.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. If there was, it wasn't reaching everywhere.
Yeah, agreed. It was, and I can't even imagine the places. Everyone followed the rules you probably quite a lot.
And even when there was, they only had osses. It's not like they could come like screaming through with the blues and twos and sirens. It'd be a posse.
This
if
is
anything.
it. It was dark times, and I think it was dark times everywhere. I'm sure England wasn't the best place to be during the late 1800s. But again, we're quite lucky that this was really well documented. It was a really good case, and it's led to an amazing book and film. And good.
It is. It's a heck of a book.
Yeah, really is. Anybody should check it out. And that really kind of brings me to the end of the... Not that I'm calling this Wisconsin Death Trip. This really is about Black River Falls. Until next time, Mr. Wilson.
You look after it and love yourself, Lee. Bye-bye.